Alien General Jackson felt a chill run down his spine as he glimpsed the human soldiers on his view screen, the warriors that would make him instantly quit his prestigious military career and flee to the safety of Earth. In a dimly lit auditorium at the Terran Defense Academy, an elderly man named Walter Simpson sat in a plush chair on stage, his wrinkled face catching the glare of the spotlight. Dozens of eager young cadets leaned forward, hanging on the war veteran's every word. "The Norcadian Empire," Walter began, his voice gravelly with age. "They conquered countless worlds, never met a species that could match them. Until us." The cadets murmured. They knew of the Norcadians, 8-foot-tall giants, 4 beefy arms, the best warriors in the galaxy. Their fleet invaded our solar system, intending to enslave us like all the rest, led by General Jackson himself, a brilliant strategist, battle-hardened, brutal. Walter paused, his eyes distant, reliving the memory. Our fleet was small, primitive, vastly outnumbered and outgunned, but it was all we had. I was just a young lieutenant aboard the TDS Valiant, the flagship of our defense. The mood was grim. We all expected to die that day. The auditorium was silent except for the hum of the air recyclers. The cadets were transfixed. But we had a duty, to defend Earth, to fight for our freedom, no matter the odds. Humanity's fate hung in the balance. Walter leaned forward, his eyes blazing with intensity. What happened next would change the course of history, shape the galaxy for generations. This is the story of how we fought, how we won. This is the story of humanity's finest hour. Walter leaned forward, eyes blazing. The Norcadian warships fired first. Plasma torpedoes and laser beams cut into our fleet like a hot knife. The Valiant shook as its shields strained against the onslaught. Our kinetic missiles and railguns returned fire, punching holes in their hulls. He clenched a fist. Norcadian boarding pods latched onto our ship like ticks. Shock troopers poured out, all muscle and aggression. We met them head-on, rifles hot, training and instinct against brute strength. His voice fell to a whisper. It was hell in those corridors, blood and screams. We fought tooth and nail, but they just kept coming. I watched good men die, torn apart, but we gave as good as we got. Walter's eyes flashed with defiance. I led a desperate charge, blasted my way through their front line, got up close and personal with my combat knife, dropped a dozen of those bastards myself, bought the boys some breathing room. He laughed, a harsh bark, caught the eye of General Jackson himself. He was watching, you see, guess he'd never seen humans fight like that. Wanted to know what made us tick. Walter's face darkened. So he ordered his goons to take prisoners, soften us up for questioning. We held out long as we could, but they swarmed us under, dragged me and a few others away in chains, brought us before Jackson in his command ship. The old soldier's gaze bore into the cadets. There I was, beaten and bloody at the feet of humanity's greatest enemy, but I had a fire in my heart that wouldn't go out, and that's when things took a turn. Walter paused, his eyes haunted by the memory. There I was, chained and bleeding, staring up at the towering figure of General Jackson. He had 4 arms, each as thick as my torso, and eyes that seemed to bore into my soul. The cadets leaned forward, hanging on every word. He demanded to know our secret. What made us fight so hard against such impossible odds? I looked him dead in the eye and told him the truth. Walter's voice grew stronger, filled with conviction. I said, we fight for our home, for the people we love. That's what gives us strength. That's what makes us human. He chuckled darkly. Jackson was taken aback. I don't think he expected that answer. He started asking about Earth, about our history and culture. I think he was starting to realize we weren't just some primitive species to be conquered. Walter's face grew pensive. As we talked, I began to see him in a different light, not just as a monster, but as a being with his own struggles and beliefs. It was a strange moment of understanding between enemies. Suddenly, the auditorium shook with a distant boom. Walter grinned fiercely. That was when all hell broke loose. The fleet had come back for us, led by Admiral Novak herself. They hit the Norcadian ship with everything they had, buying us a chance to escape. His eyes danced with excitement. We broke free and fought our way through the ship, taking down guards left and right. Then the boarding parties arrived, led by none other than Captain Lee, my oldest friend. Walter's voice grew somber. In the chaos, I found myself face to face with Jackson again. This time I had the upper hand. I could have ended him right there. He looked out at the sea of faces, his gaze intense. But I didn't. I lowered my gun and offered him a choice. Surrender and end the bloodshed. To my surprise, he took it. Walter leaned back, a weight seeming to lift from his shoulders. That day we learned that even the fiercest of enemies can find common ground, that there's always hope for peace if we're willing to take the first step. Walter's voice grew weary as he recounted the aftermath of that fateful battle. With Jackson in custody, we returned to Earth as heroes. The Norcadian Empire was reeling, their greatest general captured. They quickly agreed to a ceasefire and peace talks. He shifted in his chair, the medals on his uniform glinting under the spotlight. Jackson was held in a secure facility, questioned by our best interrogators. But something strange happened. Walter leaned forward, his eyes distant. Through those long hours of debriefing, Jackson started to change. He became fascinated by us humans, our resilience, our ingenuity, the way we could show mercy, even to our greatest enemy. The cadets murmured, intrigued by this turn of events. As the peace talks went on, Jackson made a decision that shocked us all. He wanted to defect, to leave the Norcadian Empire behind and seek asylum on Earth. Walter chuckled dryly. The Norcadians were furious, of course. They branded him a traitor, demanded his return, but our government saw the opportunity. He tapped his fingers on the armrest, a rhythmic beat. They granted Jackson asylum, gave him protection, and me. I got promoted to captain, assigned as his liaison and guide. Walter's eyes sparkled with amusement. Imagine that. Me teaching a Norcadian general about life on Earth, showing him our cities, our culture, helping him share his knowledge of the galaxy with our military and scientists. He shook his head, marveling at the strange turn of events. It was a time of great change, of new possibilities. The war was over, but a new chapter was just beginning. Walter paused, his eyes scanning the auditorium. The cadets were silent, hanging on his every word. But our time of peace was short-lived, he continued, his voice heavy. As Jackson shared his knowledge, Earth made great leaps in technology. We expanded into the stars, growing stronger by the day. His fist clenched. The Norcadians grew nervous, saw us as a threat to their power. They couldn't stand the idea of humans as equals. Walter's eyes flashed with anger. So they launched a surprise attack, bombarded our cities from orbit. Millions died in the first hours. He stood, his body tense. But we were ready this time. Jackson and I led the counterattack, used every trick he taught us. His voice rose with excitement. We met them in the skies above Earth, the Valiant at the head of our fleet. Jackson was right there beside me, manning the weapons. Walter's eyes glistened. We tore through their ships, outmaneuvered them at every turn. They couldn't touch us. Suddenly his voice cracked. But then a plasma blast headed straight for me. I didn't see it coming. A single tear rolled down his cheek. Jackson. He pushed me out of the way, took the hit himself. Walter's shoulders slumped. I held him as he died. He thanked me, can you believe it? Thanked me for being his friend. Said he hoped his death would bring peace. He looked up, his gaze fierce. And it did. The Norcadians were broken, their leadership in shambles. They finally agreed to a real treaty. His voice was barely a whisper. But the cost, God, the cost, millions dead, and Jackson... Walter straightened, his medals glinting. But that's the price of peace, and it's a price we have to be willing to pay. He looked out at the cadets, his eyes burning with intensity. That's what Jackson taught me. That's what I'm passing on to you. Peace is fragile. It must be protected at all costs. Walter saluted, a final tribute to his fallen friend. That is the legacy of humanity. That is what we fight for. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel. And for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.